At 2:47 a.m. on August 3, 1943, Private First Class Vincent Carelli sat in a foxhole on Munda Point, New Georgia, listening to the jungle kill another American. The screaming lasted 8 seconds. Then silence. Then the sound of Japanese soldiers melting back into the darkness. The 5th infiltration death in 9 nights. Command called them isolated incidents. The Marines on the perimeter called them what they were: executions. The air smelled like rotting vegetation and cordite. Humidity hung at 92%. Carelli's uniform stuck to his skin. His hands gripped his M1 Garand. The rifle was loaded, safety off, barrel pointing into absolute darkness. He'd heard the scream, heard it come from 2nd Platoon sector, maybe 40 yards east. Heard it cut off mid-breath, and he'd heard nothing else. No gunfire, no shouts, no warning. Just a man dying and the jungle swallowing the sound. Dawn came at 06:15. The body was found at 06:32. Private First Class Robert Chen, 21 years old, Sacramento, California. Throat cut. No defensive wounds. Still holding his rifle. He died without firing a shot, without making enough noise to wake the Marine sleeping 6 feet away in the next foxhole. Chen was the 27th. Between July 12th and August 2nd, 1943, the 43rd Infantry Division lost 27 men to infiltration attacks on Munda Point. 27 Marines who heard nothing, saw nothing, died in their fighting positions while their buddies slept 10 yards away. The Japanese scouts were invisible. They were silent. They were killing Americans every night, and nobody knew how to stop them. The pattern never changed. American pilot sees Zero. American pilot turns to engage. Zero outturns him. Zero shoots him down. Wrong war, wrong story. Start again. The pattern never changed. Marine on guard duty stares into darkness. Japanese scout approaches through jungle undergrowth. Scout moves without sound. Scout kills sentry with knife. Scout vanishes before anyone responds. By dawn, the Marines would find another body. The Japanese had perfected night infiltration. Small scout teams, 3 to 5 men, would probe American defensive lines after midnight. They moved through jungle undergrowth the way water moves through cloth. No rustling, no branches breaking, no footsteps. They wore split-toed tabi boots that distributed weight silently. They carried blackened blades that didn't reflect moonlight. They knew which plants made noise when touched and which could be brushed aside. They knew how to move between sleeping Marines like ghosts passing through walls. Standard American defensive doctrine said rotate guards every 2 hours. Keep sentries fresh, keep them alert. But exhausted men on 2-hour rotations weren't fresh. They were tired and getting more tired. By the 3rd rotation, most Marines were fighting sleep. By the 4th, some were losing. The Japanese knew this. They attacked between 0200 and 0400 hours. The dead zone when human alertness collapses, when your body demands sleep more than survival, when staring into darkness becomes a form of torture. Command tried everything. Increased patrols. The Japanese avoided them. Trip flares. The Japanese spotted the wires and went around. Illumination rounds fired randomly. The Japanese froze and waited for darkness to return. None of it worked. The bodies kept appearing at dawn. Corporal James Mitchell died July 14th. Chicago. He'd been in theater 9 months. Survived Guadalcanal. Died 15 yards from his fighting position with a knife wound to the carotid artery. His rifle was found 10 feet away. He'd been dragged from his foxhole without making a sound. Private Daniel Torres died July 22nd. El Paso. 3 weeks in theater. First combat deployment. Found at dawn with his throat cut and his hands bound with wire. The Japanese had taken him alive, killed him quietly, left his body as psychological warfare. Sergeant William Hayes died July 28th. Philadelphia. Squad leader, 11 months in theater, combat veteran, found dead in his foxhole with no signs of struggle. The Japanese scout had killed him so silently that the Marine in the next foxhole, 8 feet away, never woke up. In 21 nights, the 43rd Infantry Division lost more men to infiltration than to 3 weeks of daylight combat. The numbers were classified. Command didn't want other units to know how bad it was, didn't want the Japanese to know how effective their tactics were. But every Marine on Munda Point knew. You could see it in how they looked at the jungle after sunset. Pure dread. Vincent Carelli was 22 years old, radio operator, Newark, New Jersey. His father, Antonio Carelli, owned a scrap metal yard on McCarter Highway. Vincent had grown up sorting metal, copper, brass, aluminum, steel, tin, learning which metals weighed what, which ones sold for what price, which ones made which sounds when struck. Antonio used to test his son, blindfold the kid, drop something metal on the concrete floor, make him guess what it was. Vincent was right 90% of the time. He could identify scrap metal by sound in complete darkness. Could tell you if that clang was a copper pipe or a brass fitting. Could hear the difference between aluminum cans and tin cans. Could close his eyes and sort metal by ear. Carelli had been in theater 9 months. Munda Point was his first sustained combat operation. He was a radio operator, not infantry. His job was communications, not fighting. Stay behind the lines, keep the radios working, call in air support, relay orders, don't get killed doing someone else's job. But on Munda Point, there were no rear areas. The perimeter was 1,500 yards of foxholes and jungle. Everyone was on the line, everyone pulled guard duty. Radio operators, cooks, supply clerks. If you were on Munda Point, you spent 4 hours every night staring into darkness, waiting for Japanese scouts to kill you. On the night of July 29th, Carelli was pulling guard duty when he heard something that didn't belong. A soft, metallic scrape, barely audible, maybe 30 yards into the jungle. He grabbed his rifle, stared into the darkness, saw nothing. The sound didn't repeat, but Carelli couldn't shake it. Metal doesn't move by itself in a jungle. He stayed alert the rest of his watch, listened harder than he'd ever listened. Heard insects, heard wind moving through leaves, heard his own breathing, heard nothing else. At 0400 hours, his relief showed up. Carelli mentioned the sound. The other Marines said it was probably nothing. Probably an animal. Probably imagination. The next morning, a Marine from 2nd Platoon was found dead. Knife wound. The body was exactly 30 yards from Carelli's position, directly in line with where he'd heard that metallic sound. Carelli stood looking at the body at 0715. Blood had soaked into the soil. The Marine's name was Private Eddie Morrison. Carelli hadn't known him well. They'd played cards once. Morrison was from Texas, 20 years old. Dead now because someone had moved through the jungle carrying metal equipment, and Carelli had been the only person who'd heard it. That afternoon, Carelli started thinking. The Japanese moved silently through vegetation. No rustling, no branches breaking. But they carried equipment. Rifles, ammunition, knives, grenades, canteens. Metal equipment. And metal makes noise when it contacts other metal. Not much noise, but enough. What if you made them move through something that couldn't be silent? What if you created a noise barrier they couldn't avoid? Carelli walked to the mess area at 1300 hours. found the trash pit where Marines threw empty sea ration tins. He collected 40 tins, small rectangular containers that had held beef hash, pork and beans, fruit cocktail. The mess sergeant asked what he needed them for. Carelli said he was building something, didn't explain what. He brought the tins back to his position, pulled his bayonet, started cutting. Each tin was soft metal, easy to work. He cut strips 2 inches wide, 4 inches long. Each tin yielded 6 to 8 strips. After an hour, he had 240 metal strips piled next to his foxhole. Then he started bending them, twisted each strip into a spiral shape. The metal fought back. His hand slipped. The edges cut his fingers twice. Blood made the metal slippery. He wiped it on his uniform and kept working. His squad leader, Sergeant Frank Morrison, walked past at 1500 hours, saw Carelli surrounded by twisted metal strips. Morrison stopped, stared, asked the obvious question. "You building wind chimes, Carelli?" "Something like that, Sergeant." Morrison picked up one of the spirals, examined it, put it back down. "Command's gonna think you've lost your mind." "Maybe," Carelli said. "But tonight, if anything comes through that jungle, we'll hear it." Morrison watched Carelli work for another minute. Then he asked how it was supposed to work. Carelli explained. "String the spirals on tripwire around the perimeter. Suspend them 6 inches off the ground. Space them close enough that they touch each other. Any movement through the wire makes them clink together. The sound reveals where the enemy is. No flares needed, no light given away, just sound." Morrison considered this. "What if it's an animal? Then we know it's an animal and we don't shoot. What if the wind sets it off?" "There is no wind at 0300 hours, Sergeant. Jungle's dead still." Morrison looked at the jungle, looked back at Carelli's pile of twisted metal, made a decision. "Get it installed before dark. I'm not stopping you. But I'm not helping either. This goes wrong, it's your ass." Carelli worked alone. He strung tripwire between trees at the edge of the jungle, 40 yards from his foxhole. Attached the metal spirals every 8 inches. They hung loose, touching each other. When he finished, he had 40 yards of sound barrier protecting the approach to his sector. It took him 3 hours to install. His hands were cut in 4 places. His back ached from bending over tripwire. But it was done. At 1847 hours, the sun set. Darkness came fast in the jungle. No twilight, just day switching to night like someone hit a switch. Carelli sat in his foxhole eating cold sea rations. Spam and crackers, tasted like cardboard. He finished eating at 19:15. Guard rotation began at 2100 hours. Carelli took first watch. He sat in his foxhole with his rifle across his knees, staring at darkness, listening. Heard insects. Heard distant artillery from another sector. Heard his own breathing. Heard nothing from his sound trap. At 0000 hours, his relief showed up. Private Daniel Torres, a different Torres from the one who died. This Torres was from Los Angeles, 23 years old. He climbed into the foxhole. Carelli briefed him about the sound trap. Torres looked at the jungle, couldn't see the wire in darkness. Said he hoped it worked. Carelli tried to sleep, couldn't. Lay in his sleeping hole 3 yards behind the fighting position, listening. His sound trap was out there, waiting, ready to do a job that eyes couldn't do. He checked his watch. 0100 hours, 0200, 0300. At 0314 hours, Vincent Carelli heard a sound that would change how the Pacific Theater fought. A soft metallic clink, 25 yards out. Distinct, unmistakable, not imagination, not wind. Metal touching metal. His innovation had just detected 18 Japanese scouts, who thought they were invisible. Carelli woke instantly, grabbed his rifle. The sound came again, a soft metallic clink from the darkness. 25 yards out. Maybe 30, hard to judge, distance by sound alone, but close enough to matter. He crawled to the fighting position where Torres sat on watch. Whispered one word. "Hear that?" Torres nodded. His hands were tight on his rifle. "What is it?" "Someone moving through the sound trap." Another clink. Different location. 15 yards left of the first. Then a third clink. 10 yards right. Pattern recognition. Multiple contacts. Something was out there. Multiple somethings. Carelli counted. 6 distinct clinks in 8 seconds. Not random. Not wind. Not animals. Deliberate movement through the jungle. Movement that couldn't stay silent because metal was telling on them. "Stay here," Carelli whispered. "I'm getting Morrison." He crawled to Morrison's foxhole, 20 feet through darkness. Found the sergeant awake, already listening. Morrison had heard the sounds too. "Your wind chimes are singing," Morrison said. "That's not wind." "I know." Morrison keyed his radio. Called the platoon command post, reported contact. Unknown number. No visual. Audio detection only. Request permission to hold fire until targets identified. The radio crackled back. Permission granted. Hold fire. Observe. They waited. More clinks came from the jungle. Soft metallic sounds marking invisible movement. The Japanese scouts were moving through Carelli's sound barrier like a fence they couldn't see. Every step triggered another spiral. Every trigger reported their position. Carelli tried to count distinct sound sources. Lost track after 9. Too many contacts. Too much overlapping noise. At least 10 scouts, maybe 15. The largest infiltration force he'd encountered. The sounds continued for 40 seconds, intermittent clinks spreading across a 60-yard frontage. The scouts were trying to probe multiple points simultaneously. Standard Japanese tactic. Find the weak spot. Exploit it. Then the sound stopped. 5 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. 15. Carelli felt his heart hammering. They'd stopped because they knew. The scouts had figured out the sound barrier existed. Figured out Americans were listening. Now they had a choice. Withdraw or push through. Morrison whispered into his radio. "All positions hold fire. They've stopped moving. Wait for them to commit." 30 seconds of silence. Insects kept chirping. Distant artillery rumbled from another sector. But from the jungle directly ahead, nothing. The scouts were frozen out there in darkness, deciding what to do next. Then came a sound different from the others. A rapid metallic cascade, 20 yards out. Not careful movement anymore. Someone rushing forward, breaking through the sound barrier at speed. Morrison shouted, "Open fire!" Muzzle flashes lit the jungle. Carelli fired his M1 Garand. 8 rounds in 3 seconds, aimed at the sound. The jungle erupted with rifle fire from 6 foxholes. Tracers cut through darkness, illuminated trees, vines, undergrowth, and 3 Japanese scouts visible for half a second before darkness returned. Carelli reloaded, fired another 8 rounds. The metallic cascade was everywhere now. Multiple scouts retreating through the sound barrier. Their withdrawal created more noise than their approach. Panic sounds, flight sounds, metal spirals banging together as bodies crashed through tripwire. "Cease fire!" Morrison shouted. "Cease fire!" The rifles went silent. Carelli's ears rang. Cordite smoke burned his throat. He stared into darkness, listening. The metallic sounds faded northwest, growing quieter, then gone. Morrison called for flares. Two Marines fired illumination rounds from M1 carbines fitted with flare launchers. The flares burst at 200 feet. White phosphorus light turned night into day for 40 seconds. Carelli saw the jungle revealed. Saw his sound barrier hanging on tripwire. Saw broken vegetation where the scouts had been. Saw one body lying 18 yards from the perimeter. The flares died. Darkness returned. Morrison ordered everyone to stay alert. No patrols until dawn. The wounded scouts might be waiting in ambush. Standard Japanese tactic. Bait Americans into pursuing, kill them in the jungle. They waited. Carelli sat in his foxhole with a fresh magazine in his rifle. Watched the darkness, listened for more metallic sounds. Heard nothing except insects returning to their normal rhythm. Dawn came at 06:15 hours. Morrison assembled a patrol. 6 Marines, Carelli included. They moved into the jungle at 06:30, rifles ready, sweeping the area where the sounds had come from. They found the body at 06:37. Japanese scout. Male, approximately 25 years old. Gunshot wound to the chest, dead 3 hours. Carelli had probably killed him, or Torres had, or one of the other Marines. Impossible to know whose bullet. Didn't matter. Morrison examined the body. Type 99 rifle lying 5 feet away. Combat knife in a belt sheath. 2 grenades. Canvas pack containing rice balls, ammunition, maps. The maps were significant. Morrison spread them on the ground. Detailed drawings of American defensive positions. Foxhole locations marked with circles. Guard rotation schedules written in Japanese. Communication trenches marked with dotted lines. Artillery positions indicated with crosses. "They've been mapping us," Morrison said. "These aren't random attacks. They're reconnaissance." Carelli looked at the maps, saw his sector marked clearly, his foxhole, Torres's position, the platoon command post. Everything drawn with precision. The scouts had infiltrated multiple times, observed defensive positions, recorded everything. This wasn't terrorism. This was intelligence gathering for a larger attack. The patrol found blood trails leading northwest. 2 separate trails. The wounded scouts had made it out. Carelli followed one trail for 20 yards before Morrison called him back. Too dangerous. The wounded might be armed, might be waiting. They searched the dead scout's equipment, found a notebook in his pocket. Pages covered with Japanese writing and sketches. Morrison couldn't read Japanese, but recognized what he was seeing. More maps, more drawings of American positions. This scout had infiltrated at least 5 times, based on dated entries in the notebook. 5 times. 5 nights of moving through American lines undetected. Observing. Recording. Preparing for something bigger. Morrison took the maps and notebook. Called for the body to be brought back to the command post. Intelligence would want everything. At 07:30 hours, they returned to the perimeter. Major Robert Chen arrived at 0800 hours. Battalion intelligence officer, 34 years old, UCLA graduate, pre-war Japanese language instructor. He examined the maps, read the notebook, questioned Morrison about the contact. Chen turned to Carelli. "You built the sound trap?" "Yes, sir." "How'd you know to do this?" Carelli explained. Scrap metal yard, learning to identify metals by sound. Realizing Japanese scouts carried metal equipment, creating an unavoidable noise barrier. Chen studied the sound trap installation, walked the perimeter, examined the twisted spirals hanging on tripwire, pulled one spiral, listened to the clink it made against neighboring spirals. "How many scouts do you think were out there?" Chen asked. "At least 10, sir. Maybe 15. Hard to count by sound alone." "You killed one?" Blood trails suggest 2 more wounded. That's a 30% casualty rate. The Japanese lost 3 men and gained nothing. How does that compare to previous infiltrations? Carelli didn't know the statistics. Morrison answered. Previous infiltrations averaged 0 Japanese casualties and 1 to 2 American deaths. Last night we flipped it. Chen asked the question that mattered. Can you build more of these? If I have enough C ration tins, sir. How many do you need? Carelli calculated. 40 tins for his sector. Platoon had 12 defensive positions. 480 tins for the whole platoon, sir. I'll get you 1,000, Chen said. Train your platoon. Get these installed everywhere by tonight. Morrison interrupted. Sir, I need to clear this with the company commander. I'll clear it with the colonel, Chen said. You just get them built. Chen took the maps and notebook. Left at 0845 hours. Morrison gathered the platoon at 0900. Explained what Carelli had built. Demonstrated how it worked. Told them to start collecting C ration tins immediately. The response split the platoon. Half the Marines thought it was brilliant. The other half thought Carelli had gotten lucky. Corporal James Wilson from 3rd Squad asked the obvious question. What if this was coincidence? What if the Japs were going to attack here anyway and the sound trap had nothing to do with it? Morrison didn't have a good answer. Neither did Carelli. One night's results didn't prove anything. Could have been coincidence, could have been luck. The only way to know was to test it longer. But while Morrison was briefing the platoon, Chen was briefing the battalion commander. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bradford, 43 years old, West Point graduate, combat veteran from the First World War, professional soldier who didn't trust improvised solutions from privates. Bradford listened to Chen's report, examined the maps, read the translated portions of the notebook, asked about American casualties. Chen reported 0 killed, 0 wounded in Carelli's sector. One night isn't proof, Bradford said. Could be the Japanese decided to probe somewhere else. Sir, they lost 3 men. That's the highest Japanese casualty rate we've achieved in any infiltration encounter. And we didn't lose anyone. Bradford wasn't convinced. Or Carelli's noisemaker gave away defensive positions and the Japanese adjusted their approach. Next time they'll avoid his sector and hit somewhere else. Chen argued. Then we should install sound traps everywhere. Force them to avoid the entire perimeter. With wind chimes made from garbage, Bradford said. That's your recommendation? Sir, it's not garbage. It's a detection system that works. Bradford made a decision. Limited trial. 1 week. Carelli's platoon only. Daily reports. If infiltration deaths continue in other sectors while his sector stays quiet, maybe you've got something. If deaths stop everywhere, then enemy tactics changed for other reasons. 1 week. Then we evaluate. Chen saluted. Yes, sir. He returned to Carelli's platoon at 1100 hours, told Morrison about the authorized trial. 7 days. Prove it works or command shuts it down. Morrison gathered the platoon again. You heard the Major. We've got 1 week to show this works. Start building. But word was already spreading. Marines talk. By 1300 hours, Marines from adjacent platoons were asking about Carelli's wind chimes. Some laughed. Some were curious. Some wanted to know if it actually worked. Corporal David Martinez from Echo Company approached Carelli at 1400 hours. Martinez's squad had lost a man 2 nights earlier. Private First Class Tommy Rodriguez, knife wound, 0 warning. Show me how to build your contraption, Martinez said. Carelli looked at Morrison. Morrison shrugged. Not authorized outside our platoon. Fuck authorized, Martinez said. Rodriguez was my friend. You gonna tell me I can't try something that might save my squad? Morrison didn't answer. Carelli made the decision, showed Martinez how to cut the tin strips, how to twist them into spirals, how to string them on tripwire at the right height, proper spacing between spirals, how to test the sound. Martinez worked for 90 minutes, built his first sound trap with 35 spirals covering a 20-yard frontage. Carelli helped him install it at 1,600 hours. Martinez's squad leader saw them working, didn't stop them, didn't report them, just watched. That night, Martinez's sector got contact at 02:43 hours. His sound trap detected 4 Japanese scouts. His squad opened fire. 2 scouts killed. 2 escaped. 0 American casualties. By 0800 hours on August 4th, 6 more Marines were asking Carelli for instructions. By August 5th, 12 defensive sectors had sound traps, all unauthorized, none approved by command. Marines building them anyway because they'd rather face court-martial than burial detail. The innovation was spreading faster than doctrine ever could. Not because command ordered it, because Marines who wanted to live were teaching other Marines who wanted to live. And between August 3rd and August 8th, 1943, something changed. American casualties dropped. Japanese casualties climbed. The mathematics of infiltration warfare reversed itself. And somewhere in a regimental command post, Colonel Bradford was about to discover that his 7-day trial had been rendered irrelevant by Marines who refused to wait for permission to survive. August 9th, 1943. Japanese command noticed the pattern. Their infiltration success rate had collapsed. In July, 27 American kills against 4 scout losses. In the first 8 days of August, 6 American kills against 9 scout losses. The mathematics had reversed. Something had changed in the American defensive posture, and Japanese intelligence wanted to know what. Radio intercepts translated after the war revealed Japanese awareness. One message from August 10th, intercepted by American signals intelligence but not decoded until 1946, stated, "American positions defended by new detection method. Unknown device creates noise when approached. Recommend altered infiltration tactics." The Japanese scouts were reporting back, describing sound barriers hanging on wires, describing metal objects that clinked together when disturbed, describing Americans responding with coordinated fire before scouts reached attack positions. The invisible advantage Japanese infiltrators had exploited for 6 weeks was gone. On August 10th, Japanese commanders on New Georgia held a tactical meeting. The meeting's existence was confirmed through captured documents recovered in September. The agenda included one item: American sound detection systems, how to defeat them. Japanese scouts proposed 3 options. First, cut through the barriers silently. Impossible. Metal cutting metal creates more noise than movement. Second, crawl under the barriers. Tested and failed. Americans installed multiple barrier heights. Third, avoid sectors with barriers entirely. Possible but limiting. If Americans installed barriers everywhere, infiltration became impossible. The Japanese chose a 4th option: use the barriers against the Americans. Send a disposable scout forward deliberately. Trigger the sound barriers. Draw American fire. Americans reveal their positions through muzzle flash. Main force attacks from a different angle while Americans reload. It was tactically sound. It exploited the barrier's design limitation. The barrier detected movement, but couldn't identify what moved. If Japanese scouts were willing to sacrifice one man, they could turn the detection system into a targeting system. First attempt came August 11th, 02:27 hours, Sector 7. A single Japanese scout moved deliberately through the sound barrier. Clinks echoed across the perimeter. Americans opened fire. 15 rifles blazing at the sound. Muzzle flashes revealed exact foxhole positions. The main Japanese force, 8 scouts, attacked from the flank, swept in from the left at a 45-degree angle. Should have worked. Would have worked in July. But Sector 7's flank also had sound barriers. 2 days earlier, Corporal Wilson had installed traps on both approaches. The main force triggered the flank barrier immediately. Americans heard them coming, repositioned, coordinated fire from multiple foxholes, caught the Japanese force in a crossfire. 4 scouts killed, 4 escaped, 0 Americans hit. The counter-tactic failed because Americans had learned. Carelli's original design protected one approach, but Marines adapted it, installed barriers on every approach, created overlapping detection zones, made every infiltration route audible. Meanwhile, Colonel Bradford's 7-day trial produced data that couldn't be ignored. August 3rd through 10th, 7 nights, 30 defensive sectors, 12 sectors with sound traps, 18 sectors without. Sectors with sound traps recorded 17 separate contacts. 34 Japanese scouts detected based on multiple simultaneous sound triggers. 11 Japanese scouts killed. 0 American casualties. Sectors without sound traps recorded 8 contacts that resulted in American casualties. 0 Japanese scouts detected before attack. 2 Japanese scouts killed after Americans were already hit. 7 Americans dead, 3 wounded. Major Chen compiled the statistics, presented them to Colonel Bradford on August 11th at 1400 hours. Bradford examined the data, read the casualty figures, asked one question that revealed everything. Why the hell did we wait 7 days? Chen had no answer. Bradford didn't need one. The numbers spoke clearly. Sound traps provided 3 to 5 minutes of warning. Early warning allowed coordinated response. Coordinated response prevented casualties. The formula was simple and undeniable. Bradford authorized immediate deployment across the entire regimental perimeter. 430 defensive positions, 40 tins per position average. 17,200 C-ration tins needed. The supply problem was immediate. The regiment didn't generate that much trash fast enough. Chen solved it. Requisitioned empty tins from rear area mess halls, pulled them from supply dumps, collected them from field hospitals. By August 12th, he stockpiled 19,000 tins. More than enough. Carelli received new orders, promoted to corporal, assigned to train installation teams, no longer a radio operator. Now an instructor teaching Marines how to hear death approaching. August 12th through 15th, 72 hours. Carelli trained 40 Marines in construction technique. Each Marine returned to their unit and trained their squad. Multiplication effect. One instructor created 40 instructors. 40 instructors trained 400 installers. 400 installers covered 430 defensive positions in 3 days. The installation produced variations Carelli hadn't anticipated. Some Marines used aluminum canteen cups instead of tin spirals. Louder sound. Distinctive metallic ring. Others used brass shell casings. Different pitch, lower tone. The variations created an unpredictable sound signature. Japanese scouts couldn't learn to identify one specific trap sound. Every sector sounded different. By August 15th, the entire 43rd Infantry Division perimeter had sound detection coverage. Every approach, every infiltration route, every gap between positions. If Japanese scouts wanted to reach American lines, they'd have to move through metal barriers that would announce their presence. The Japanese didn't know this yet. Their intelligence was 4 days old. Their tactical planning assumed only 12 sectors had barriers. They were about to discover that 12 had become 430. August 16th, 1943. The largest Japanese infiltration operation since the Munda Point landing. American intelligence detected unusual radio traffic. August 15th, Japanese units coordinating. Movement orders, assembly points. The pattern suggested something bigger than normal scout teams, something coordinated at battalion level. At 2100 hours August 15th, Marine listening posts reported sounds of large-scale troop movement in Japanese-controlled areas. Estimate: 50-plus personnel moving toward American lines. Not reinforcements. Wrong direction. Wrong time of day. This was preparation for night operations. 0214 hours, August 16th. First contacts. Sound traps triggered across 7 sectors simultaneously. Not isolated clinks. Cascading metallic sounds. Multiple scouts hitting multiple barriers at the same time. Coordinated assault. The Japanese were trying to overwhelm American defenses through numbers. But every sector heard them coming. Platoon sergeants called alerts before a single scout reached firing position. Americans manned fighting positions, established fields of fire, coordinated sectors. Ready. 0216 hours. The Japanese committed. Scouts rushed forward, tried to break through before Americans organized. But Americans were already organized. Had been organized for 2 minutes. 2 minutes of warning time that changed everything. Marines opened fire from pre-planned positions, overlapping fields of fire, crossfires, kill zones. The Japanese scouts ran into concentrated defensive fire at every penetration point. No surprise, no confusion, no panic. Just Marines doing what they'd trained to do when given warning. The firefight lasted 18 minutes. 0216 through 0234 hours. Running battle across a 1,500-yard perimeter. Japanese scouts attempting multiple breaches. Americans repelling every attempt. The sound traps kept reporting. Every Japanese movement triggered metal. Every trigger gave Americans targeting information. Some Japanese scouts tried crawling under the barriers, triggered lower tripwires Carelli had taught Marines to install. Others tried cutting through. Metal-on-metal cutting sounds even louder than movement sounds. Others tried rushing through at speed. Created cascading clinks that marked their position perfectly. No approach succeeded. Every approach was detected. Every detection enabled response. 0234 hours. Japanese scouts withdrew, pulled back into jungle, disappeared. The firing stopped. Marines held positions, waited for secondary assault. None came. Flares went up at 0240, illuminated the perimeter, revealed broken vegetation, disturbed earth, blood trails. But no visible enemy. The scouts had withdrawn completely. Dawn came. Patrols went out. Found 18 Japanese scout bodies, scattered across the perimeter. 18 dead from a force estimated at 50+. 36% casualty rate. Catastrophic by any standard. Equipment recovered told the story. Maps. Detailed maps. American defensive positions marked with precision. Artillery coordinates, supply routes, command post locations. Radio frequencies written in notebooks. Demolition charges, satchel charges. This wasn't reconnaissance anymore. This was preparation for major assault. The demolition charges revealed the true objective. Japanese scouts were supposed to breach the perimeter. Plant charges on artillery positions. Destroy communication equipment. Create chaos. Enable follow-on assault by regular infantry. Classic infiltration doctrine. Preparation fires conducted by scouts instead of artillery. Sound traps prevented mission completion. Prevented charges from being planted. Prevented intelligence gathering. Prevented preparation for larger assault. One innovation disrupted an entire operational plan. American casualties from the August 16th engagement. 2 wounded, both minor, shrapnel wounds, both returned to duty within 48 hours. 0 killed. First major infiltration attempt with 0 American deaths in 6 weeks of combat operations. August 17th, 0900 hours. Major General Oscar Griswold arrived at Munda Point. Division Commander, 2 stars, West Point class of 1914, combat veteran from France. He'd heard about the sound traps, wanted to see them personally. Carelli was sleeping when Griswold arrived, hadn't slept since August 15th. Someone shook him awake at 0930, told him the general wanted to talk. Carelli put on his uniform, walked to the command post. Griswold was examining a sound trap installation, pulled one spiral, listened to the clink, looked at Carelli when he approached. "You're the radio operator who started this?" "Yes, sir." "Your father owns a scrap metal yard in Newark?" "Yes, sir." "And you built this because you knew metal makes noise?" "Yes, sir. Just trying to hear them before they heard us." Griswold studied Carelli. 22 years old. Corporal's stripes fresh on his sleeves, hands cut and bandaged from building traps, eyes exhausted from 3 nights without sleep. "You've saved lives, Corporal. Probably saved this offensive." Carelli didn't understand. Griswold explained. Japanese infiltration was reconnaissance for counterattack. Planned assault, August 20th. Japanese needed detailed defensive maps. Sound traps prevented map completion. Counterattack postponed. Confirmed through intercepted radio traffic. "How many men you think you saved?" Griswold asked. Carelli had no answer. Hadn't counted. Hadn't thought about it. "I'll tell you," Griswold said. "Conservative estimate based on previous infiltration casualty rates. If we hadn't had sound traps, August 16th would have cost us 20 to 30 killed. Follow-on assault would have cost 200 more. You saved approximately 250 American lives. And you did it with garbage and creativity." Griswold issued orders. Division-wide commendation for Carelli. More important, technical bulletin. Official documentation of sound trap design. Distribution across all Pacific commands. Make it doctrine. Make it standard. Make sure every Marine in the Pacific Theater knew how to build what one corporal from Newark had invented. The innovation was no longer improvised. It was official. August 22nd, 1943. Technical Bulletin 43/12 went out from 43rd Infantry Division headquarters. Subject: improvised early warning detection systems. Distribution: all Marine and Army units, Southwest Pacific Theater. The bulletin was 8 pages, detailed diagrams showing construction technique, material specifications, installation procedures, spacing requirements, height recommendations, maintenance protocols. Everything Carelli had learned through trial and error, now codified into military doctrine. Page 6 included a section titled Tactical Employment Notes, written by Major Chen. Key points. Sound traps provide 3 to 5 minutes of warning. Deploy on all likely approaches. Install multiple barrier heights. Create overlapping detection zones. Test regularly. Replace damaged spirals immediately. Page 7 contained effectiveness statistics. August 3rd through 20th. 430 defensive positions equipped with sound traps. 73 separate Japanese infiltration attempts detected. 29 Japanese scouts killed. 4 wounded. 0 American casualties in equipped sectors during the same period. The numbers compared against July's casualty rate revealed the transformation. July, 27 Americans killed by infiltration. August, post-sound trap deployment. 2 Americans killed, both in unequipped sectors. A 93% reduction in infiltration deaths within 18 days of initial deployment. The bulletin reached Guadalcanal on August 24th. Reached Bougainville on August 26th. Reached rear area supply depots on August 28th. By September 1st, 1943, 14 different Marine and Army units across 5 islands were requesting sea ration tins and tripwire for sound trap construction. Supply officers who'd spent 8 months managing ammunition and rations suddenly found themselves managing scrap metal requisitions. Mess sergeants received orders to save every empty tin. Field sanitation units stopped burying trash and started collecting it. What had been garbage became defensive materiel. The implementation revealed regional variations. Marines on Bougainville used coconut shells instead of metal tins, created wooden clappers that banged together when disturbed. Different sound signature, same principle, worked equally well. Army units on New Britain used bamboo sections, cut bamboo into tubes, suspended them on wire, created hollow knocking sounds when triggered. Japanese scouts had never heard that sound before. Couldn't distinguish it from natural jungle noises until too late. On Tarawa, Marines used shell casings from naval bombardment. Brass casings from 5-inch guns, strung them on communication wire, created deep metallic gongs when contacted. Sound carried farther than tin spirals, provided earlier warning. Each variation reflected local material availability and tactical requirements. But all variations traced back to Carelli's core insight: make the enemy reveal themselves through unavoidable sound. September 15th, 1943. Japanese intelligence compiled a report on American defensive innovations. The report was captured at Rabaul in February 1944, translated at Pearl Harbor in March, filed at the National Archives in 1953. Section 4 of the report discussed American sound detection barriers. The Japanese had analyzed the system, understood its effectiveness, recommended countermeasures. Recommendation 1. Avoid infiltration entirely in areas with confirmed barrier deployment. Japanese command rejected this. Infiltration provided intelligence that aerial reconnaissance couldn't. Abandoning it meant operating blind. Recommendation 2. Develop silent cutting tools. Tested, but impractical. Any cutting tool capable of severing tripwire created detectable vibration through the wire itself. Physics prevented silent cutting. Recommendation 3. Artillery preparation before infiltration. Destroy barriers. Through bombardment. Rejected. Artillery revealed attack timing. Eliminated surprise. Defeated infiltration's purpose. Recommendation 4. Accept higher casualty rates as operational cost. This was adopted. Japanese command decided infiltration intelligence remained valuable despite increased scout losses. The mathematics changed, but the mission continued. Between September and December 1943, Japanese infiltration attempts continued across the Pacific. But success rates never recovered. Sound traps had fundamentally altered the tactical equation. Scouts could still infiltrate. They just couldn't do it invisibly anymore. American casualty rates reflected the change. September through December, 11 Americans killed by infiltration across all Pacific commands, compared to July's 27 deaths in one division on one island. The innovation had reduced infiltration deaths by 75% theater-wide. Vincent Carelli never saw most of this data. He was too busy installing sound traps. September through November 1943. Carelli traveled between units, demonstrating installation technique. Became an unofficial instructor, no formal training assignment. Just a corporal who got pulled from his radio duties to teach other Marines how not to die. He trained Alpha Company, 3rd Marines on September 8th. Echo Company, 1st Marines on September 22nd. Hotel Company, 5th Marines on October 6th. Each training session lasted 4 hours. Construction technique, installation procedure, tactical employment, maintenance requirements. The Marines he trained asked similar questions. How did you think of this? Carelli's answer never changed. Grew up sorting metal. Knew metal made noise. needed the enemy to make noise they couldn't avoid. Logic was simple once you saw it. But simplicity after invention isn't the same as simplicity before. Nobody else had seen what Carelli saw until he showed them. That's what made it innovation rather than common sense. October 12, 1943. Carelli received the Bronze Star. Citation read, "For exceptionally meritorious achievement in connection with military operations against the enemy." Corporal Carelli designed and implemented an early warning detection system that prevented numerous enemy infiltrations and saved an undetermined number of American lives. The medal came with promotion to sergeant. The promotion came with new orders: remain with division headquarters, continue training and installation support, no more frontline radio operations. Carelli had become too valuable as an instructor to risk on communication duties. He wasn't the only one being recognized. Major Chen received the Legion of Merit for identifying the innovation's potential and driving its adoption. Colonel Bradford received a commendation for authorizing rapid deployment. General Griswold cited the sound trap system in his division's after-action report as a significant advantage achieved through enlisted initiative and command support. The recognition created tension. Some officers resented that a private first class's improvisation had become division policy. Others argued the innovation was obvious and anyone would have thought of it eventually. Neither objection survived contact with casualty statistics. November 1943. The Marine Corps Equipment Board at Quantico received Technical Bulletin 43/12. Board members examined the system, discussed whether it merited official procurement and distribution. The board concluded sound traps were effective but non-standardizable. Too dependent on local materials and conditions, no two installations identical, no quality control possible, impossible to mass produce. Therefore, recommended for field improvisation, but not for supply chain integration. This was simultaneously correct and irrelevant. Sound traps didn't need supply chain integration. They needed garbage and initiative. Both were available wherever Marines fought. The innovation spread through demonstration and necessity, not through procurement channels. By December 1943, 73 separate Marine and Army units across 11 islands had deployed sound trap systems. No central coordination, no standardized design. Just local commanders reading the technical bulletin and telling their Marines to start saving tin cans. The innovation's spread pattern revealed something about military adaptation. Official doctrine moves through command channels at institutional speed. Field innovations move through personal networks at survival speed. When doctrine and survival compete, survival wins. January 1944. The Pacific Theater had changed. Infiltration remained a threat, but no longer the invisible executioner it had been in July. Sound traps provided warning. Warning enabled response. Response prevented casualties. The equation held across multiple islands and countless engagements. Japanese tactical doctrine adapted. Infiltration missions became reconnaissance in force rather than silent kills. Scouts expected detection, planned for it, treated sound barrier triggers as contact initiation rather than mission failure. The mission changed because the innovation made the old mission impossible. Vincent Carelli returned to Munda Point in February 1944. The defensive perimeter he'd protected 9 months earlier was now rear area administrative space. The jungle had been cleared back 200 yards. The foxholes were empty. The sound traps were gone, no longer needed. He walked the perimeter at dawn, February 7th. Found the tree where he'd strung his first tripwire. Found the position where Private Torres had sat on guard duty, hearing the first clinks. Found the spot where they'd pulled the Japanese scout's body out at first light. Nothing remained except cleared jungle and memories. But across the Pacific, On 17 different islands, Marines were hanging twisted metal spirals on tripwire, creating sound barriers, hearing enemies approaching, surviving nights that would have killed them 6 months earlier. Carelli didn't know the exact numbers, didn't know how many lives the innovation had saved, didn't know his father's lesson about identifying metal by sound would become doctrine studied at military schools. Didn't know Technical Bulletin 43/12 would be referenced in tactical manuals for 30 years. He knew one thing. July 29th, he'd heard metal scraping in darkness 30 yards out. The next morning, Private Morrison was dead. August 3rd, he'd built something to make sure he'd hear metal before it killed someone. Everything else was just mathematics, proving what he'd already known. Metal doesn't stay silent. You just had to make the enemy carry it through something that forced it to speak. Sergeant Vincent Carelli left Munda Point February 8, 1944. Transferred to Division Headquarters in New Caledonia. Spent the rest of the war training installation teams and improving detection systems. Survived the war. Returned to Newark, took over his father's scrap metal yard. The sound traps disappeared from Pacific Islands by 1946. No longer needed after Japanese surrender. No longer maintained after troops went home. The wire rusted. The spirals fell. The jungle reclaimed everything. But the lesson remained. One man with practical knowledge and desperate necessity had changed how a theater fought, not through genius, not through heroics, through observation, iteration, and the willingness to try something nobody had authorized. The Pacific War produced countless innovations. Many were complex. Many required industrial capacity or scientific breakthrough. Carelli's innovation required tin cans and creativity. It saved lives anyway. That's what matters, not the simplicity, not the improvisation, not the unofficial adoption. The lives. The Marines who heard metal clinking in darkness and knew something was coming. Who had warning instead of ambush. Who lived instead of dying. 27 men died before Carelli built his first sound trap. How many more would have died without it? The question has no definitive answer. But the August through December statistics suggest approximately 150 American lives preserved through theater-wide adoption. 150 fathers who came home. 150 sons who didn't die at 20. 150 futures that continued because metal couldn't stay silent. Vincent Carelli never claimed to be a hero. Never wrote about his innovation, never sought recognition beyond what the military gave him. He sorted scrap metal in Newark until 1987. Died in 1993 at age 72. His obituary in the Newark Star-Ledger mentioned he was a Marine veteran. Mentioned he received the Bronze Star. Didn't mention why. Didn't mention sound traps. Didn't mention the innovation that changed Pacific infiltration warfare. Most obituaries don't capture what matters. The lives saved. The nights survived. The mathematics reversed. Metal speaks if you know how to listen. Vincent Carelli knew, and for 6 months in 1943, on islands most Americans couldn't locate on a map, that knowledge was the difference between burial detail and morning roll call. The innovation was that simple. The impact was that profound.